I honestly don't know if this is clickbait, but if it is, well then bait me. Not with a Scottish accent. We debated the biggest controversies in language learning. I mean, as a very controversial man. Julesy and Steve Kaufman, Lingo Steve, oh, that's in combination. It's a combination channel. I didn't even know it existed. All right, so I've seen it around, by the way, for Chinese, I believe, was it? Chinese learning videos and whatnot. But without further ado, let's see. Who do I agree with?
So one criteria is that it should have a standardized writing system for it to be a fully fledged language.
According to whom?
That is, some linguists believe that.
Shanghainese is a language. Shanghainese, i.e., Huadong. But to me, they're different languages. They're sufficiently different.
But is that based on just hearing them, mutual intelligibility or lack thereof? It's a bit gray though, because what is it's a sliding scale of intelligibility.
It is.
So when do we draw the line? Like, this is a language now.
Good question of social linguistics, really, rather than linguistics alone. But hey.
People get pretty divided whenever the topic language learning comes up. So that's why I brought on Steve Kaufman. He is a polyglot and the co-founder of Link.
Come on now. I don't appreciate to hear swear words. I'm a man of class. Let's be classy, okay? Let's be classy. Polyglot? It's a bad word.
Sponsor of today's video. Steve is someone who has spent decades learning foreign languages and thinking about what works best. We went through a series of topics in language learning and linguistics that tend to garner some pretty strong opinions. Yeah. And trust me, we did not mince words with our opinions. So buckle up. Here we go.
Splendid.
So I brought you here today, Steve, to do something just like a little bit different. Sure. Basically, we're going to go through a series of topics that can garner strong opinions in the language learning and linguistics communities. And so what we're going to do is I'm just going to say, a statement. And then we're both going to say whether we, agree, disagree. Cool. The one who has,
all of us. I'll do it too.
Stronger opinion can go first. And then, we'll just have like a little bit of a conversation after that. Okay. So is that okay?
Sure.
Okay. So let's start with our first statement. Yeah. Any adult can learn a second language to native-like fluency.
To native-like fluency, no, not any adult. To native-like, you have to have a lot of dedication, a lot of time, and personally exceptional talent. If native-like fluency is, because that's the highest possible. That's what I think. Some can, others can get really close, but exactly to native-like, as per the prompt, then no, not any adult can do that.
Yeah, I'm going to disagree.
Okay, cool.
So I'm going to say I slightly disagree. So less than the disagree you said. So if you seem like you have a strong opinion on this, maybe you can go first.
Let's go.
The to a native level, like I have heard people speak foreign languages extremely well. Yeah. Say English. And they think they sound like a native. There's always something that gives them away, right?
Not always. There are some people that can do it. There are people that are really close, and then there are people that objectively, I've met a few, completely would have fooled me, even in my own native language.
So I think it's highly unrealistic for most people to think they can achieve a native level. I just think it's a valid goal to achieve I'd like to play golf like Tiger Woods. I'm highly unlikely to do that. Not like
okay, so actually
impossible.
Actually, about that, do you think it actually might be kind of detrimental to strive to sound like a native,
That's actually a very good point. It depends on the person. I'll let them speak first and then I'll tell you what I think.
In the way that if it's impossible physiologically or,
it's not.
The vocabulary just can't be met. My goal is to be like, Tiger Woods. Is that detrimental to the learner, you think?
No, I think it's a good thing to strive for, but you have to recognize that the native speaker, when we learn languages, we are basically becoming familiar with patterns. We're creating these webs of connections in our brain. And the native speaker who has heard since childhood, thousands of hours, has read millions of words, like the enormous amount of input. There is no way that the adult who starts into learning at age 20 will ever consume as much of the language as the native speaker. So they will never be quite as good, but they can get very, very close.
Exactly. I think the problem here is a little bit with the prompt. Not the problem, but the prompt as it's written makes it so that we have to kind of reject it because it says any adult, and then it says to native-like fluency. But if you adjust it a little bit and you say some talented adults, and then to almost native-like, or functionally, virtually native-like, or if you put virtually means it might not be exactly, but it's pretty much indistinguishable, then yes, it can happen.
It's the number of hours that is the difference between a native speaker and a learner. Because if it's number of hours, maybe, that could be filled up over time. Like, let's say a native speaker is only 18 years old, right? And they can't have had that many hours. Then someone who's 18 and then is starting to learn.
They can have that many hours because that's all they do. That's their language. So yes, if you calculate the number of hours that an 18-year-old who's native of their own language have used the language, in fact that's even superior level of hours as opposed to one-to-one matching with a L2 second language learner acquisition student, because then a lot of those hours are not going to be direct utilization within the immersive context into which all you do is think, eat, talk, argue in the language. So no,
their language, and then they learn it until the age of 80, right? It's possible that the 80-year-old in those, 80 minus 18, 62 years, might have had more input hours compared to the 18-year-old native.
Qualitatively, no.
Speaker. So in terms of hours, I just want to challenge you on that, right?
Maybe if the native speaker is a hermit or something, but the native speaker. So there are a number of issues. First of all, when we are very, very young, our brains are more flexible. So when a person is born, they conceivably could learn to speak any language. The brain is not yet, hardened, coalesced around any particular language. So there is that period until maybe we're 12, I don't know. There's varying degrees of, some people say 16, 17, where the brain is very malleable, very...
Right, yes. I mean, it depends which one you're talking about. Again, acquiring native, to be a native, I think the window is much smaller, like the first 3 years of life. It depends, in fact, on whether or not we're talking pronunciation, vocabulary, understanding, fluency, the syntax, acquisition, all of these, in fact, degrade at different paces. That's the reality of what the research shows. To be 100% native, I think it's within the first 3 years, but let me know if you guys agree.
Flexible. If the objective is to be completely mistaken for a native, you can be better than the native in vocabulary, you can be better than the native in choice of words, in eloquence, in any number of things.
That's true, if it's like an uneducated native.
But to be mistaken for a native, like not just for 2 minutes, but for 30 minutes, very difficult, that's all.
It's difficult.
Okay, so that justifies your disagree on that, right?
Yeah, and I appreciate that he said very difficult, but he did not say impossible. His example, where he did say impossible, which had to do with playing golf, I believe. I don't know who the person mentioned was, but I imagine it was like some kind of athlete, sports person, extremely excellent. Of course, it would be impossible for him because, he's an old man. He hasn't trained in it. It's like it becomes impossible. And of course, he's putting himself. But with language learning, again, it also depends when you start. The older you start, the less likely it's going to be for you to try to become native. You become monumentally less and less likely because you solidified those patterns, just like you say. But if you start young, even in your 20s, in fact, depending on the person, but in general, the younger the better.
Yeah.
Even though you think it's slightly, maybe 0.1% of people might.
Yeah, sure.
Get close.
Yeah, I agree.
Maybe.
Or you can remove the maybe. There are people that I've met them. Like I have met someone from like America. If we spoke on the phone for an hour, I would have thought he was a native Italian from the north. This happened. Very rare, but it does happen. I've met people that sounded, for instance, someone like Matt versus Japan or Dog, and they sound extremely close to a native speaker in Japanese. Someone like Tashan sounds incredible in Mandarin, and there are people that are absolutely exceptional. I've met a couple of people from Scandinavia who sounded just like an American would. So it does happen. It absolutely happened. I think the reason why in this case he's saying maybe is because, well, he didn't. And I would say neither did I. Am I close? I guess you can tell. Rather than, if I had to self-assess, I would say probably it's my intonation that makes it clear that I'm not a native speaker, rather than the single individual pronunciation of my core consonants and vowel clusters. I think if you take a single word and I pronounce it: zero, mountain, Jew, sugar, tuna, YouTube, box, glass. I think maybe I could fool someone, but as I put them within and orchestrate them organically within a sentence, then my intonation then doesn't sound like a native word, and then you can tell, okay, yeah, but he's not native, there's something wrong. I can tell that, absolutely, totally. I would consider myself a fluent speaker in English, but not someone you would mistake for an actual, true, full-on native speaker. Am I close? Am I far from that possible objective? I'll let natives tell me.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Okay. So I think we mostly agree on this one, so we can move forward to the next one.
Okay.
The second question, speaking early is overrated in language learning.
Completely disagree. You need to speak early.
So,
Yes.
Ooh, he says yes. Well, me and you, Stephen, are going to go to war over this one. You've got to start speaking from day one.
Early is overrated, yes.
for me, I would say I disagree. I don't think it's overrated.
Thank
So
you.
I think here we have some point of disagreement
Good.
here.
Okay.
Yes.
In order to have a meaningful conversation with people, you have to have some vocabulary. You have to have a certain level of comprehension. Otherwise, you're saying the same thing over and over again.
Not necessarily. That's anecdotal. The latter part, that depends. I mean, you can easily build and prepare different sentences every week if you want, even every day. But I mean, every week if you want to give it time to actually solidify in your memory. So that's easily, I don't know why I said that. And when it comes to the first part, well, yes, but to build the vocabulary and grammar confidence, you have to speak. If you only listen, you will get good at listening. If you read and write, same thing. And since the majority of us want to be able to have an actual conversation whereby I speak my mind and I understand what you say back, you have to begin, because I can write the word aluminium can 1,000,000 times, but saying it, this is a can of whatever the heck, this is a packaging, a telephone, a mouse, keyboard, you acquire it and store it in memory when you use it. You have, not to mention, to get your muscles in your mouth used to producing the sounds, which connects them and creates an experience as well. No, you have to start from day one, is what I say.
My name is, or other simple sentences. So, no, I strongly believe that the focus should be on getting the language in you. And then when you want to speak, when you are ready to speak, or when you have the opportunity to speak, go for it and don't feel inhibited.
Okay, so I heard what you said, Steve. I'm going to...
Before we hear what she says, basically, I guess he supports the comprehensible input idea. And comprehensible input is fine, but only as long as you connect it with production. Comprehensible input, as it's usually understood, meaning there is the learning curve and the memory and forgetful curve, and then you just listen, get a lot of input, a lot of listening, and that builds your ability. It's nonsense. It is something that someone who sits down and overthinks language learning would say, but do they actually speak it? That's the reality. And here's what I'm going to say. It's going to be a little controversial, but ditching all the fake polyglots for a moment. Even someone who is a language learner, real language learner, the reality is when they give you advice, you should ignore that advice unless they are exceptional at what they do. If they are mid-tier, ignore them. If they don't actually speak the language, hey, but I studied how to do it and no, ignore it. It's the same thing as, oh, you want to build muscle? Take your shirt off. If I don't see a good, strong body, I don't believe you. I don't believe it. That's how it is with fitness channels. That's why I always recording with the shirt off. It's not just a flex, literally, but it's also to show you guys I did it. I did do it. And then I studied the science and the biology of it. And so now I'm giving you advice that works, and I know it works because I did it. It's the same thing with language learning. So I personally don't care about the opinion. You could think I'm rude, but then again, I'm annoyed more than rude by the people that give advice that doesn't work, because I don't care what people think unless they actually reach a decent level, either in at least one foreign language, but if it's one, it needs to be exceptional, or in multiple languages, and then we're talking.
Push back on that a little bit. What if I put it this way, like, would you say it's a waste or not helpful to go to the gym, even though you didn't get trained in, weightlifting or the specific ways to stretch your muscles? Or do you think it's a waste to go to the gym? Because I kind of see it as similar, right? Because I think the mouth is a muscle. I think we agree that practicing speaking in the sounds of a language, it really helps train the muscles to get there. Yes. Because as we know, different languages have different mouth positions that they prefer. Yeah. And another thing is that you mentioned that children, they have their brains are more flexible. And part of it is actually they're not afraid of speaking. But as an adult, we have the inhibition. Wouldn't you agree that?
Depending on the personality. So far, I'm agreeing with her 100%. I think what Steve does sometimes, while being it is a great part of this language learning community, absolutely a very passionate individual, but he uses a lot of anecdotal evidence and thinks it's the law, basically. So he will imagine a scenario, just like he did with flashcards, and he was wrong. He imagines the scenario. It makes sense logically in his mind based on his own experience, and then he uses it as this is how things are. But personally, I find that unprofessional and unscientific. Real data, not anecdotal, but real data, deeply studied from personal experience, from a decade of teaching, and seeing what other learners and professionals say about the matter. This is the main complaint that I have with Steve, because, for instance, he can tell you he speaks 40 languages, but then when I hear him speak Italian, it's not impressive. And then again, maybe it's just because Italian wasn't the language he focused on. I'm sure his Japanese is better, but if you compare his Japanese to Matt versus Japan, a completely different level. So at that point, I'm more interested in what Matt versus Japan has to say, controversy or not, or Dogen, for instance, when it comes to that, and simply because there is direct experience that produced exceptional results.
The longer we wait to speak in a language we're learning, the more kind of inhibited that we're going to be, further down the line, maybe 3 or 4 months after we start. Right. Then we want to start speaking, and it actually becomes more difficult because we haven't been training ourselves to do it from an earlier stage.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
So 2 points. So one, is it a waste of time to go to the gym? No, you go to the gym, you train, you're weak at first, let's say, if you haven't been doing anything, and you gradually get stronger. However, in order to produce a language, you have to have the language in you. So engaging with the language is because when you understand the language, the way the brain works, you're layering networks, webs of networks to, much like a large language model, you're able to predict the next word. And as you've developed that ability to anticipate and to plan, then you start to be able to make utterances.
That's the problem with this point. You develop it by doing, Steve. You develop it by doing. That's the missing link that I believe you're not understanding in this case. Attacking the argument, not the person. He's right. Generally speaking, what he's saying is correct, but then he thinks that this justifies, well, if you don't have the language in you, you need to spend like a year, 2, whatever the heck he thinks, internalizing the language before you produce. And that's incorrect, because to create that connection, those pathways in the brain, you have to use it. It's how we learn languages.
Is in the language. And I think the idea of training your muscles, I mean, I can pronounce 20 languages quite well.
I disagree, Steve. I'm sorry you don't. Guys, if you're a big fan of him, you're going to get annoyed by me. And fair enough, you can tell me we're Metatron, neither do you. I can tell your accent in English is not perfect, so how dare you say, fine, no, I'll take it, it's fine. I understand there is a lot that I need to improve, but honestly, his Chinese is not impressive. His Japanese has 0 pitch knowledge. His Italian is, no. Can you pronounce, I'm sorry, Steve, sounds a little arrogant. And also, Matt versus Japan pronounces very well. Dogen pronounces very well. Dashan pronounced very well. I wouldn't put you in the ones that exceed a pronunciation in 20 languages. Come on, brother. Let's be real about this.
I have never been aware of having to do different things with my muscles. I really don't think that's what
the reason why you're not aware is because you don't pronounce right. It's Dunning-Kruger effect. And you can tell by the way she's looking at him, by the way. I know what she's thinking. It's just that she's very polite, differently from me. I'm like, I'm being a dog here, but hey, it is what it is. She's now thinking, I've heard you speak Mandarin, and you don't pronounce it quite well. So he's overconfident in in this situation. I'm going to call him out for it. People call me out all the time, by the way. Can I do it? So he's overconfident. He thinks he can pronounce very well. And now he's saying, I never really needed to pay attention. Yeah, because you think you do, but you don't. And his pronunciation, like his Italian, is... yeah.
Determines how well we pronounce. What determines how well we pronounce is more how well we hear. And if we hear the sounds correctly,
but both, actually,
the brain will find a way to produce them.
The brain will find a way to compensate it, actually. And then that's why you need professional correction if you want to sound as close to a native speaker as possible. Because otherwise, what the brain does is that, I'll give you an example, because I used to have this problem. You say, sit, limerick, this, tick, ticket. And my Italian brain compensates and thinks you're saying, sit, limerick, ticket, tick. If I don't professionally sit down and understand, even though I'm hearing it, what the brain is doing is approximating using my own native matrix. Is it the end of the world that I'm going to say pick instead of pick? Not necessarily. But then I'm not going to claim, hey, I speak and pronounce very well and my brain does it for me. No, it doesn't. My brain fucked up because it was easier. This is the reality of it. And it took me some time to realize sit is a sound. I don't have that sound in my language. So I have to understand how it's produced in order to improve my pronunciation if I so choose. No one is pointing the finger and telling you you have to sound as good as possible. But since this was one of the things, and that's the thing, he thinks he sounds really, really good, but he doesn't.
It's not that you're training your mouth in certain, physical things. I don't agree with that. So, no, this...
We can tell. Yeah, could you imagine doing Mandarin, Mongolian, Vietnamese without trying to understand and train your mouth and how to produce the sounds correctly? Could you even... Yeah.
This is an area where we disagree.
I mean, it's physically, it's true that, not every language has the same sounds, right? Some sounds in different languages exist, but don't exist in others. True. So for those ones, you actually do have to train your mouth to...
She's right.
Be positioned in that way. That
she's right. You can freaking scoff and roll your eyes all you want, Steve. She is right, and you are wrong. I don't care that he thinks it's because again, here is the thing: when she speaks English, she sounds really good, right? When you speak Mandarin, you don't. So you're gonna listen to her.
Produces that sound.
Yeah, I don't agree with that.
I've seen that.
I totally disagree with that.
Yeah.
There are certain sounds in certain languages that are particularly difficult for people who aren't used to that language. So the other point you raised about people are inhibited, of course they're inhibited. I am more inhibited if
I don't understand his disagreement, by the way. She said that there are some sounds that are present in one language, but they're not in another. This is a fact. This is a fact. Like I guess you can disagree with the fact that we breathe oxygen doesn't change physical reality here. However, so look, in Chinese, there is the distinction between sh and sh. It does not exist, neither in English nor in Italian. So what are we even talking about? Not even mentioning the idea of adding tones as a phonemic component, pitches in Japanese, which he hasn't got a clue about. So the TH sound, that th and the, doesn't exist in my language. So how are you disagreeing with that, Steve, is what I'm failing to understand. And at this point, you can be obtuse as much as you want, but then you got to prove it, right? Because she's saying, no, that's how it is. You got to train your mouth, otherwise you can't sound well, or not to mention native-like. And then he says, no, I never needed to do that. I speak really well for 20 languages. Well, freaking prove it. Switch to Mandarin. Speak whatever languages you have in common. I don't know how many languages he speaks. Switch to it and prove it. He doesn't do it because he would colossally fail. Although at this point, I'm starting to think that he actually thinks he could, and he's just not doing it because whatever. And that's how it is.
I don't understand what the person is saying if I have very few words. So I feel much more confident using the language once I have a certain number of words in me that I understand, level of comprehension. enough hours
Okay, I'll
of
push back
exposure
on
to
that
the
then.
language.
Yeah.
Pardon?
So what would that be then? Like the number, you said you want to have a certain amount of hours or a certain amount of words in you. So do you have a kind of rough estimate for what that
She's brilliant, by the way. Man, put him on the spot. Come on. What are you going to say to that? Let's see. Let's see the number.
would be before someone should start producing,
Let's go.
speaking that language?
Yeah. So if I look at my own experience at Link, learning, say, Farsi or Arabic or Czech, because we measure the number of words I know, passive vocabulary, if I have 3,000, 4,000 words of passive vocabulary, and each form of the word is counted as a separate word. Okay. But when I have that level, then I feel I could engage with an online tutor and I will be able to say something.
You're out of your mind. 4,000 words, I don't even care that you're considering go, went, gone, up, down, every single one of them. You add a letter, you add a thing, you add a little conjugation, and this is all separate words, which is, to me, a useless way to count. I prefer to count in word family because otherwise you're just basically doing the how much do you bench pro of language learning, who cares? Oh, I know 50,000 words, well, great. And like 300 are like the same freaking word but with a little conjugation. Whatever, but if you want to count it like that, makes you feel better, that's fine. I don't care. Freedom at this point, First Amendment of the Constitution. Here's the thing though, 4,000, even if you count it this way, 4,000 words in your passive vocabulary before you open your mouth, I'm gonna flip the table. You're out of your mind. You're out of your mind.
I will be able to understand something of what they say.
Okay. That's a very concrete way of thinking about it. Once I reach this level, then I should talk to someone for real. So that's good advice for language learners for sure.
That's actually bad advice for a language learner, but she's so polite and nice, she's not going to say it. It's concrete. I agree with that. At least he gave us a number. I wish he gave us the number of hours that he thinks is like, no, unless you put 3,000 hours of language learning, you should open your filthy mouth. I wish he said that. I wish he continued pushing. Now she's just being polite. I would not be polite. Maybe I shouldn't be in a conversation with this man because I don't know what to tell you. Talk about accent and pronunciation all you want. My Italian blood is still diluted pizza, which equals tomato sauce plus spices.
All right. Okay. So let's move on to the next one. This one I think would be a little bit of a little bit of a disagreement here. So AI is a good substitute for practicing with native speakers. And so I'm just going to jump in here and I'm going to say I slightly agree on this one. And you can give me your opinion, Steve.
Steve.
Well, it's hard for me because I haven't used it very much. We do have that ability at Link, and I have engaged with the AI and say I finished an interview and it was about Lebanon, and I'll ask a question and it'll answer something. And so for me, it's all more content. It's more input. I do it to generate input. I'm not interested in having a conversation with AI.
Man, this guy hates production. No wonder at this point he's lacking on some areas. Regardless, you can say 20 languages all you want. 50, 100 languages. I'll give you my opinion. AI is a good substitute for practicing with native speakers only when native speakers are not available. So if native speakers are available, that's the better choice. That's the best option always. But say you don't know anyone, you don't have people to speak with, and you still would like to have some sort of practice in production and listening, both, then I would say utilizing the advanced language models. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what they are. There's nothing wrong with it, and it can be pretty good. Just be careful with theoretical knowledge, though. So if you ask them, tell me the pitch or the Mandarin tone, they might F up. Or they might, if you ask them to teach you, they might tell you something that the native speakers don't actually say. Wrong vocabulary and whatnot. But when it comes to, I want to just say this, and then they speak back and you speak back again, you could do it with, I do it myself. When I don't have anyone to speak with, I will practice a little bit because it's fine, and then you listen. Nothing wrong with it. It's not like the devil or anything, or the Black Plague of the Middle Ages, Yersinia pestis bacterium.
But
so
that's
is your answer disagree, or what is your answer
What is your
on
answer?
this one? AI is a good substitute for
not a
practicing with
substitute.
native speakers.
Not a substitute.
So you'd be a disagree on this one?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so
I think in this case, to kind of strawman him, steelman his argument, because she's using the word substitute, so I think he means, well, if you can choose between a native speaker and AI, you should go for native speaker. So I would agree with him on this if that's how he means it. Because at the end of the day, he did say it was content, right? It did say it was content. I'm curious to see what else we've got. Some languages are inherently easier to learn than others. I want to see this one. I'm curious about this one. Let's go.
Next question. Some languages are inherently easier to learn than others.
I did mispronounce inherently, didn't I? You muppets.
And I have a very strong opinion on this, so I'm going to go first. I'm going to say I strongly disagree.
All right.
Really?
So I agree.
Well, I'm sorry, but I'm with Steve, unless she manages to word it and phrase it in a way. Yeah, when it comes to language learning, there is objective difficulty and subjective difficulty. Objective difficulty means that, yeah, if a language is 21 letters and another one is 3,000 as a basis for alphabetization, then of course, objectively, that latter will be harder. But then this, same you can say about languages with cases or languages with grammar functions that are objectively harder. Just harder, that's how it is. But then on top of it, you have to consider subjective difficulty, which is dependent on where you are coming from. So you are, in fact, the ultimate variable within language learning, and I imagine she's going to go to that. Like if you're Italian, Spanish is going to be easier for you than if you were Korean, and that sort of stuff, maybe. But then again,
some languages are easier than others.
Well, I strongly disagree with that. And I really do feel that the more languages you learn about, the more you realize that every language has difficulties.
They're not all comparable. Sorry, I disagree with you on this one. It is a fact, once again, that some languages are absolutely harder, and this has been professionally assessed multiple times. It is what it is. So in this case, I understand his look, because I mean, it's nice what she's saying, but not all languages are made or created equal.
Difficult aspects of them. I think the thing people don't recognize is that they're usually kind of hidden in different areas. So for me, since I'm a native Mandarin speaker, whenever someone is trying to learn Mandarin, they always say, "Oh no, the tones are so difficult, the characters are so difficult to learn." But for me, like that's like walking. It's like breathing air. Those things are not difficult at all. But then when I tried to learn French, like I mentioned you, or any kind of language with gendered nouns, for example, I can't wrap my brain around that.
Exactly, and these are objective factors. You can't really say, yeah, of course, Mandarin might have an easier grammar pattern or system compared to languages with gendered, although then again, you don't really have to think about it too much. I'll tell you, someone who speaks natively a language with gendered patterns. We don't think about it. I don't really think that this box is a female. It's just a linguistic thing. Maybe the only case is if you do a Disney movie and you ask me to animate this, I might turn it into a girl because feminine noun. But other than that, it's not like I literally think, wait, the table is a boy. I don't. It's just a grammar thing, to be honest. And in fact, and this might be a little controversial, but I think the gender is in fact connected more strongly to the article than it is to the final vowel of a word. Happy to defend that on a dedicated video if needed. Regardless, it's not all you could say, well, characters are objectively harder than a language that doesn't have characters like Chinese, but a language with complicated grammar functions, such as gendered language or cases, is going to be harder than a language that doesn't have cases. That's fine, but these are not equally distributed. There isn't like a law that says physically, if you have two hard components on the writing systems, then the grammar is going to be easier as a way to compensate because all languages are created equal. That's not a thing. So some languages absolutely require like 3, 4, 5 times the amount of work and study time than others. And of course, what language you speak will influence that greatly as a native speaker, but it's still a fact.
So I think for me, every language has complexity, but it's just kind of in different places. Every person who are born and they're learning their native language, no matter which one it is, I think it's equally hard for the baby.
For the baby as a native, maybe, but then again, Japanese, they have to spend 10 years to learn to read and write as natives. That's not equally difficult to an Italian who only has to learn 21 letters, and then the spelling is going to be phonetically consistent for the most part. Is it? I mean, that already defeats the point.
Yeah, that's my opinion.
Okay, well, it depends what you mean by inherently. Like every baby, any baby can learn any language.
Yes.
Some languages take longer to learn
Yeah.
for the baby.
Yeah,
right.
which ones would you say?
Well, one of the issues is because learning the language includes learning to read. And some languages are less transparent, more opaque. So the if you look at Spanish or Turkish, there's a one-to-one relationship between the writing system and what you hear. In Danish and English, that's not the case. And so it takes a little bit longer for Danish and English kids to learn to spell, for example. So those are some inherent differences.
See, that's a good point. I can admit it. He pissed me off earlier on, but now he's making a good point. I'm agreeing with him.
And the other consideration, of course, is what your native language is. So the more the language you're learning is similar in structure and in vocabulary and in writing system to languages you already know, the easier it becomes.
That's a good point, which is why she, as a native speaker of Mandarin, an excellent teacher, by the way, I've watched some of her videos in my personal Mandarin learning journey, that's why she finds French difficult, because it's the lack of relation.
There's relative difficulty based on languages you speak, and in terms of absolute terms, I mean, it's more difficult to learn an alphabet system than to learn Chinese characters, because you got 26 letters in the alphabet. You got so many
No, it's easier to learn the alphabet, but I think you misspoke.
characters to learn. So some languages are, in terms of difficulty, different, and that means that some must be objectively more difficult than others.
I think her position is a bit on the philosophical side rather than a linguistic one, and she's free to her opinion, but it's just a fact that not all languages are equally distribute the difficulty equally within their subsections or subcategories of learning. This is fascinating. I'm halfway through, but it is a 33 minutes video. I'm going to leave it at this. We might continue it on part 2. But of course, if you want to keep watching, do click the link in the description and pinned comment to give him a like. And then if this video does really well, we'll do the second part. How about that? Does that sound like a plan? Thank you for watching and joining Metatron's Academy. And thank you to both the creators for producing this interesting, engaging, and sometimes enraging video. Have a good one. Bye.